Welcome back, class. I want to continue the discussion we were having in our previous lecture about the existence of God. We were talking about grounding it with a scriptural foundation. We talked about some key passages. And then we talked about the teleological argument, which is the argument from order and design, or intelligent design, as it's sometimes called today. And we talked about briefly the axiological argument, or the argument from moral absolutes. I didn't spend a lot of time on that. Let me clarify why. In our first opening lecture, we talked about what is truth. And in that lecture, we defined truth as absolute, objective, and propositional. And so we are now just building off of that foundation when we talk about moral absolutes. So I didn't feel like we needed to spend as much time there. There is another argument for the existence of God called the cosmological argument. It's the argument of cause and effect. I am here today, and I am the effect. The cause was my parents. My parents are an effect of their parents, my grandparents. But my grandparents, however, now see, they were an effect caused by my great-grandparents, who, by the way, incidentally, were caused by my great-great-grandparents, so on, so on. Now, the argument of cause and effect argues that you can't have an infinite regress of causes. You can't go to ad infinitum and beyond. There comes a stopping point. And the argument then just basically is to get people to think there has to be an uncaused cause, a first cause to everything that we see. Now, there's a modified formula of this argument that is more of a syllogism. The premise number one, the main premise, the subset premise, or premise number two, and then the conclusion. You know, like you saw in geometries, those theorems, if this is true, then this is true. And so this particular modified cosmological argument is popularized by William Lane Craig, and it's called the KALAM argument, K-A-L-A-M. You say, that's a weird sounding name, KALAM. Why did he name it that? Well, actually, he didn't name it. William Lane Craig did not formulate the argument. He did not originate the argument. In fact, the argument's been around for half a millennium or longer. The argument was first originated with Muslim apologists debating with the infidels, proving logically that God exists. So you see immediately the problem, right? We're using the argument formulated by Muslims to show that God exists. The weakness of these arguments, whether it's teleological, axiological, or cosmological, we say, first of all, the strength is it shows you there must be a God. The weakness is it doesn't identify that God with the God of the Bible. There's still a gap. There's still another step to take. So, we're going to use this argument that has been created by Muslims half a millennium ago, not because we're in agreement with the premise that Allah is God, not at all. But we're recognizing that the argument is so tightly fit together that it's a good argument to show why there must be a God. And we're going to take it a step further when we talk about the reliability of scriptures to identify who this God is we're proving exists. So with that in mind, let's talk about this KALAM argument, and let's talk about its three premises to make sure you understand it. Premise number one: everything that has a beginning, or everything that begins to exist, has a cause. It's deliberately worded. Intentionally, I hope you caught it. It does not say everything that exists has a cause. That would be untrue. It would invalidate the first premise, which then invalidates the whole conclusion. The reason it's not true is because if I said everything that exists has a cause, then the pushback would immediately be, then who caused God? What caused God? If you're saying God exists, great, but who caused him? So it's important that we word this argument concisely, exactly, precisely, everything that began to exist, has a cause. Okay? Premise number 2, the universe has a beginning. Therefore, the conclusion, therefore, the universe has a cause. Now, we need to test this. The burden of proof is actually on us this time. We are not just throwing out an assertion and saying, hey, I got this tight little argument and you can't answer it. I dare you to try to answer it. No. We're going to prove the burden of proof. We're making the claim, so the burden of proof is on us. So the way we prove this syllogism is to test premise 1 and premise 2. If either one of these premises is invalidated, the conclusion is not valid. If both of these are valid and true and logical, then the conclusion cannot be questioned. If the premises are correct, then the conclusion is undeniable. All right? So let's test premise number 1. Does everything that begins to exist have a cause? Is that verifiably true? Well, observational science would certainly indicate that this is indeed true. Let's illustrate. When you see a house that previously did not exist on a lot, and now it does exist, you know by observation that there must have been a cause to bring about that house into existence. It didn't just eternally be existent somewhere in the cosmos and land there. No, that's irrational. We know from observational empirical data, if a house wasn't there and now it is, a cause brought that into existence. If we go walking through a forest and we look at the trees around us, we know that they haven't always been this way. This is evidence of growth, and that this growth can come all the way back to a non-existence. And then there was a seed that was planted, and then a tree came about, and there was just this process. They're not eternal trees. There's a process to it. Looking at the radiometric dating of potassium and argon. Potassium K on the periodic table, argon AR on the periodic table, so that KAR dating, it's a way to sort of try to measure time, geochronology, archaeology. How long does it take for this potassium to turn into argon? That's sort of the idea behind it, the radioactive decay of the isotope. Well, in layman's term, basically what we're saying is that this type of dating shows that the age of the Earth is limited. Another way to say that, it had a beginning. We're going to argue then, if it had a beginning, then it had to have a cause. But for now, just we're observing things. Whatever we can observe, scientifically, empirically, observationally, it seems to validate premise number 1, that whatever began to exist, there was a cause behind it. Let's look up to the stars. They came into existence. How? There had to be a cause. When we look at the gas particles in outer space, there was a cause. We can confidently state that whatever we observe in common sense terms, whatever began to exist, observationally, empirically proven, there was a cause behind it. So to deny premise 1 requires someone to deny and defy all observational science. In essence, one who would say that this premise cannot be validated has to affirm that all observational data is incorrect. The common sense approach says premise number 1 is strong, it's accurate, it's precise, it's true, it's verifiable, it's validated. We're starting with a good premise. Okay? So just because premise number 1 is true doesn't mean premise 2 is true. And in fact, in this particular syllogism, premise 2 is the one that gets attacked. No one attacks premise number 1. It's sort of common sense. To attack that, as I just mentioned, is to defy and deny all empirical data. So if I want to invalidate the conclusion, I need to focus on premise number 2, that the universe has a beginning. If I can prove that that is not true, then I can escape the conclusion. So, does the universe have a beginning? Is that verifiably true, or perhaps it's just this belief that Christians hold on to escape the implications that could be seriously damaging to their faith? It's a blind faith. It's a blind hope that we hold on to. Just the universe had a beginning. You know, honestly, both theist and non-theist, generally speaking, teach premise number 2 as accurate. They don't necessarily do it in the context of creation or in the context of God's existence or in an apologetic argument. It's more of a random, in their minds, isolated truth that they don't understand the implications of it. But they, generally speaking, theists and non-theists alike hold to the fact that the universe had a beginning. Models for explaining the world's existence, there's some varied approaches throughout human history. In fact, in the ancient world, the Greeks believed in a solid state model, which in essence they believed the universe, matter, everything was eternal. And they just held that. They didn't have a modern scientific understanding that is at our disposal today. And they really didn't even think about the implications, per se, of even understanding that model. It was just what they believed. But science overturned that belief and showed that the universe isn't in a solid state model. And so the second law of thermodynamics would show that the Earth at one time, I'm going to put this on a layman's term. This is not a science class, right? So in a layman's term, at one point, the energy level, the heat level, was at 100% capacity, and then there was this exchange that took place, and as every time it's exchanged, we're running out of usable energy. The energy is being dissipated. The heat is being dissipated. It's not disappearing, but it's becoming unusable. It's running down. So I don't get that. Okay. Walk back into my office again. The pen has fallen over. You bumped it, my table too hard, and so the pen is not standing. Okay, but now you notice on my desk is a Veritas coffee mug, and it's filled to the top. I mean, the very top. And I said, "No, look, I want you to be really, really, really careful. Don't bump if you bump this spills. I don't want to splat on you. It's really, really hot. I like my coffee really hot. And I just, I need to feel like I got to give you that warning." Okay, thanks for the warning, Dr. Lester. But you're looking at it, there's no steam coming off of it. There's no indication that it's hot. And so you're curious about it. You say, "Hey, can I ask you a question, Doc?" "Yeah, sure." How long has your cup been sitting there with the coffee?" It's been there a week now." Yeah. But I'm telling you, when I poured it out, I get the water to a boiling point, and it's just really, really hot. And so I just want you to know, you have to be careful. Okay, can't keep a straight face. If you saw me and you thought I seriously held that position, you would question some things about me, my sanity, my general intelligence, because anybody with common sense knows that the coffee doesn't keep getting warmer and warmer and warmer and hotter and hotter and hotter the longer it sits. Just the opposite takes place. There's a heat exchange. And instead, as it runs out of that heat, it becomes lukewarm coffee. And the only way to generate that heat again is to nuke it in a microwave. But again, if you don't drink it quickly, the heat dissipates. On a grand scale, on a much more complex scale, this is what's happening with the laws of thermodynamics. The heat, the energy, is being exchanged, and what it's getting in return is non-usable. What this implies is that there was a beginning when it was all set to full capacity, and now it's running down. We have a better grasp, if you will, of the age of things. Any semblance of energy that's not degraded or dissipated completely would indicate that there was an infinity of past moments. But that's irrational. That's illogical. If there was an infinity of moments in time past, then we would never be able to arrive at this current moment. Listen, and this is philosophical. The only reason we are able to arrive at this current moment is because there was a moment in the past when time began. And now we have a measured approach to event after event, moment after moment after moment, that allows us to arrive at this moment. You cannot do that if time, what we call time, is infinite. If there is no beginning, if it's eternally, you just have an infinite regress of time, we would never arrive at this current moment. Believing in an infinite universe brings about too many illogical absurdities that most scientists cannot hold it in good faith. So premise number 2, academically, scientifically, obviously biblically, every evidence we have points to the fact that the universe had a beginning. So therefore, the universe had a cause. You say, okay, I'll grant you that, Dr. Lester, the universe had a cause, and the cause was the Big Bang. Okay, back it up a step. From where did those chemicals and molecules and that gaseous substance, that primordial soup, so to speak, where did that come? What caused that? Because matter isn't eternal either. So what brought, and we just back the question up a little bit. The Kalam argument deductively brings the questioner to an inescapable conclusion. If everything that begins to exist has a cause, and the universe had a beginning, then something or someone very powerful caused this universe. Now, obviously that's not the same thing as saying that Jesus, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, spoke it into existence. I get that. The Kalam argument doesn't allow us to take the argument that far. The minimal conclusion, though, there is a cause outside of this universe that is intelligent because there's design. It's powerful because it did all of this. You might be able to tease out some other attributes along the way, but at least at a minimal cause, this is what we can deduce from this Kalam argument. It's a cumulative case then. The Kalam argument is a cumulative case to bring us to the fact there is something outside of the universe that brings it into existence. Because nothing cannot cause its own existence. Something that is not the universe had to cause the universe. This makes sense, right? Something that's external brought it into being. Something that is some way prior to the universe had to have caused the universe. And the cause of matter had to be immaterial or non-matter, immaterial, because matter isn't eternal. So whatever brought this into existence, or whoever brought this into existence, was intelligent, was powerful, was immaterial, non-corporal, spirit. The cause of everything we see in this natural world had to be out of the realm of the natural to bring it into existence. Hence, supernatural. This is starting to sound a lot like the God of the Bible. They're clues. They're not facts. They're clues that point us in a direction. What apologists argue is that there has to be an explanation outside of the universe for the universe to exist. Because there's a point of origin, there had to be a cause. These arguments provide what one apologist calls a haunted universe. There's just things in the past Christians have more arguments for the existence of God that we could cover. But there are three that are primary: teleological, order and design; the axiological, moral arguments, moral absolutes; and the cosmological argument, specifically modified in this lecture to the Kalam argument. The basis for all of them are scriptural. We're grounded in the Bible, even though I don't need a Bible to know that God exists. I need a Bible, however, to know that the gospel is true, to know that there's one mediator between God and man. But I have, at least in the idea of nature, God's second book, if you will, maybe his first book if we want to call it that, the book of creation, the book of nature, general revelation. That first book points me to the fact that God exists. His fingerprints are all over creation, from the macro view of the universe to the micro view of the cell. Even people without access to special revelation can see and understand the existence of a God through general revelation. It's important that we understand this general revelation: order, design, intelligent design, moral absolutes, cause and effect. There is a cause. These evidences point to his existence. So, take some time. Familiarize yourself with these arguments. We'll come back next week and discuss the credibility, the reliability, the trustworthiness of the Scriptures. And if we can establish that our Scriptures can be trusted, we can bridge the gap between who we say that there is a God exists. We can identify that God based on the authority of a credible witness. All right, that's where we're heading. Hope you're tracking with all of this. If you have questions, please drop me a line. And until then, I'll see you in the next class.